We are the Out of Bounds Show. The Dallas Cowboys made $1.1 billion. Well, that's what they said. Right? I mean, if the Packers made $600+ million, my gosh, smallest market in the NFL. Unreal. Unbelievable. Green Bay. There's like 13,000 people there. It's a little bit more than that. I know that.
Ain't that much.
But, I mean, they're the smallest market in the NFL. Saints are the next, or 31st.
They made 600.
I think it was 650 million.
And Jerry wants me to believe they only made 1.1. Come on now, guy.
People are worried about Dak Prescott getting money and CeeDee Lamb.
Wow, why is that?
That's scabs. That's people that get bogged down in the BS. That's it's what I call scab scratchers.
When did that start? Like people just
they're HOA board members.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Oh yeah. It's well done. Yeah.
I can't do it. I just can't deal with that person.
You don't want to break down salary cap?
Well, I'm just now that I am I just can't do it. I just can't do it.
Not enough time.
No, and they're not interesting.
No.
All right. Steve Deace should be joining us here in a minute. We are the Out of Bounds Show. We're brought to you by we're on ESPN 105.9 The Zone. We're brought to you by Blue Cross Blue Shield of Mississippi. It's good to be blue. The official healthcare provider of the Out of Bounds Show, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Mississippi. We're streaming live on thezone1059.com. And you can watch the show on YouTube. Search Out of Bounds Sports. YouTube, search Out of Bounds Sports. And we're rolling here on a Monday. We asked you who's running the country right now. Who do you think is running the country? Isn't that crazy that we have to ask that question? I mean, it's a cabal. I'm just curious as to who you think it is. And what does that look like? That's where we are right now. And is our president alive? Or is he still the president? I don't know. These are and by the way, y'all are crushing it on the Ag Up Equipment text line. Let me throw that out. 601-885-3776. 601-885-3776. And that's driven by your next John Deere tractor at any Ag Up Equipment dealership, including the one in Canton and Pearl. AgUp.com to find the other 16 locations. AgUp.com to find the other 16 locations. Yeah, the Dallas Cowboys made $1.1 billion. And we're worried about paying CeeDee Lamb and Dak Prescott. I don't know when they've got another year if they want on the Micah Parsons deal, but we'll see, how that shakes out. And then you look at what like the smallest market team made in the Green Bay Packers. All right, we're going to go to the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line. We welcome in Steve Deace at Michigan Podcast. He's also one of the Out of Bounds, we'll say, political insiders, and it's been a while since he joined us on the show. His Michigan Wolverines won the national championship under Mr. Harbaugh, and one of the best coaching jobs in the history of college football when you look at it. But Steve Deace, it's been too long. How are you?
I'm well, brother. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. We're close to football season, but I wanted to do a few minutes on politics and then get into Michigan post Harbaugh with the new Big Ten, with Southern Cal, UCLA, Oregon, and Washington, and kind of where you thought the program was going, and also the Big Ten. But first, since you live this, you're in the trenches every day in politics, Republicans, Democrats. Did you ever think that we would get to this where we are now, right now in the country with what's happened the last few weeks?
No, and I think it's the most, pardon me, Bo, it's the most tumultuous spring and summer America has had politically since 1968, when you had LBJ announce he would not run for re-election, the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. in April, the assassination of Robert F. Kennedy Jr., just as he was on his way to the Democratic nomination. It's and I wasn't. This is before I was born, and I've got grandkids now. So that's my way of telling you, as someone who has done this full time for a living for almost 20 years, and has worked on campaigns from President of the United States to school board, and works at one of the top 3 largest media platforms on the American right. So, and before this was actively involved in politics as a college Republican and history buff and everything else. That is, I don't use that description lightly. I mean, just in the last 9 days, we saw one major party's presumptive nominee for president nearly assassinated. And the more we learn about this, looks more like an Oliver Stone script. I mean, this is either the most calamitous, multi-level marketing scheme of incompetence of all time, or something else. And then within that same 9-day period, the other presidential nominee is essentially taken out, hasn't been seen from in public now for going on 6 days. This is day 6. Is the last time, it was a week ago Wednesday, was the last time Joe Biden was seen in public. And ask yourself, in your life, have you ever gone 6 days without seeing the President of the United States somewhere in public? Because we're going on day 6 starting today. And he is replaced by a woman who, when she tried to run for president, garnered so little support, she couldn't even make it to the Iowa caucuses where I live, and dropped out of the race you and I got more delegates in the 2020 Democratic presidential nomination primary or just as many as Kamala Harris did, and we weren't running. I could go on and on. That's just in the last 9 days. All right. A month ago, it was a conspiracy theory and New York Times said you were guilty of a conspiracy theory and cheap fakes, talking about Biden's mental state. A week, within 2 weeks later, they were issuing editorials claiming Biden has to step aside for his mental state. And hey, we learn new facts. You could always say, hey, I learned something new. No one ever goes back, though. You ever notice this, Bo? No one ever goes back and says, hey, we were wrong about that.
Right.
You guys were right. And so no one ever does that, which tells you you're being gaslit. Okay? This isn't humility, new information. People are gaslighting you. And I could go on and on about this. Probably not the place or the forum for it, given what you typically do. But let's just say we're dealing with things and forces and events that are not typical in American politics. And so I would urge your audience to not be looking at these things typically.
Okay, one more before we go to Michigan football. Do you think it will be Trump versus Kamala, or do you think that they'll still pull her out at some point? And who do you think will win?
I have this mantra that I've been trying to get all my friends in this business, people that, are household names, everybody in your audience would know, people that are in public office, and you've probably seen me say this on Twitter all the time. So let me say it to your audience. They are not like us. You cannot analyze them the way you would us. They are way more ruthless, persistent, and want to win way more. All right, so don't look at things like filing deadlines, okay? These are people that just get federal judges to extend elections for days or weeks after the fact for reasons, okay? These things don't apply to them. And what they do on the left, and they have done this for the last 50 years, is whatever they want, and then they just kind of dare you to see if you can get the Supreme Court to say you can't do that. That's, in a nutshell, I know it's overly simplistic, and there's more nuance to it than that you could write books about. But if you were to bottom line in a mission statement, it is will to power Marxist political theory, and that is that you're not a nation of laws, but a nation of political will, okay? And so you just do what you will to do, and then see if some legal authority will stop you. So like if you lived in the state of Florida, the governor of Florida would stop you from doing these things. And he fires Soros prosecutors and all kinds of things. Typically, though, We don't have a lot of Republicans like that. And so this stuff often goes all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court, like Colorado just deciding we have feels for Trump, so we're going to take him off the ballot. And this gets all the way to the Supreme Court because there's no attorney general, there's no governor, there's no legislature no legislature to say, we'll defund that court if you do that. And so good luck to you, I'll be in a closet. There's no governor or secretary of state or attorney general in Colorado that will prosecute you for malfeasance, or secretary of state that says, we're not going to abide by that. That's completely unconstitutional. My office oversees the ballot in this state, and we're not breaking the law. Okay, there's none of that. So this craziness has to go all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court, and for weeks and months. That's Marxist theory. Act on the will of your political outcome, and then just see if the other side has the gumption or the infrastructure to stop you from doing it. So you cannot look at what are filing deadlines in Ohio, and people look that stuff up so they can sound smart, and you should sound smart, but that's not who you're up against. Okay, so the only numbers that matter are now between now and August 18th. Her polling numbers have to improve, or they'll just make up polling numbers from the same people that told you suddenly after 100 years of research, here's our new studies we came up with overnight, that masks now suddenly work to stop an aerosol, an airborne contagion. Okay, so they'll either make up polls. I'm not even joking. None of this is a joke. Straight up, they will either make up polls, or they'll be the charm offensive will be so overwhelming that they'll organically move. And if they can either make up polls or organically move them, she will be allowed to remain. If they cannot, it's even easier to get rid of her than Biden. She's not a sitting president. She doesn't have a constituency. They'll appease the racialist part of their base because they all rallied around her, gave her every advantage, and in the end, she couldn't hack it. Okay, so view this like you viewed viewed them calling for the debate in June, when it was very obvious they wanted the earliest debate in history, so that if he performed well, that would be the only one, and then they would just hide him in the basement the rest of the way, and if he didn't, they would force him out, which is what happened. Okay, that's what's happening with her. She is being given carte blanche now to prove she can be the front for whoever's running their show over there. If she's not a credible front, so that the polls are at least close enough that they can justify, quote unquote, fortifying another election, she will be gone. Right now, they don't have that narrative. No one would believe that senile dementia patient you saw on 27th is getting 80 million votes again. No one would believe that. And so that's why they had to get rid of him. They need a candidate that has a credible narrative that their fortification or ballot harvesting efforts are justified. And that's what they're in search of right now. And if it's her, if they think that she can make it close enough that they can be her so they don't have to take on any more water or collateral damage, they will. And if not, then August 18th is the day before the Democratic convention, and a bunch of people you're here saying right now who told you originally they were all for Biden too and he should stay, the Whitmers and the Newsoms and all those people are going to be suddenly called out of the bullpen. That's how they operate over there. Don't look at rules, don't look at delegate counts, none of that crap matters.
Steve Deace, political insider on the Out of Bounds show and the Farm Bureau Insurance Guest Line. You're listening to ESPN 105.9 The Zone. Also at Michigan Podcast, we brought Steve on the last few years to talk about Harbaugh and the Michigan Wolverines. And I think for several years there, Steve and the Michigan fan base couldn't imagine that Harbaugh would eventually drive the program to 3 wins over Ohio State and a national championship in the college football playoff, but he did it. Okay, I made this argument in a couple of weeks. Let's pivot here. Transition. I made this argument a couple of weeks ago, and I want to float it to you, that Sharon Moore, head football coach at Michigan, you could argue has a tougher task than Kalen DeBoer or Sharon following and trying to take, follow in Harbaugh's footsteps compared to Kalen DeBoer following in Saban's. And here's why. Because Bama's either the number 1 or number 2 recruiter, and you know the hotbed that we're in. They're only 2.5 hours away from where I'm sitting right now as far as players. Mm-hmm. I think that Moore may have a greater challenge than Kalen DeBoer. Your thoughts?
I would define it. It's a greater challenge. He's less defined as a coach. Obviously, Kalen DeBoer was arguably at worst a top 15 coach in our sport heading into last year before he went 14-1. Okay, so I would argue it's a tougher challenge, but I don't believe it's a tougher job. Michigan fans are not Alabama fans. Sharon Moore comes in here with an immense amount of goodwill. He's beloved. Michigan fans don't want to. Michigan fans are not it's natty or bust every year. We're not as fanatical about this on that zealous level as Ohio State fans are, for example. They usually the cycle with Michigan and Ohio State, which is why it's normally not a rivalry where both teams are great at the same time. You're seeing that now, but that's rare. Most of the time there have been huge swings where one program is dominated. And since Ohio State kind of figured football out for the first time, post World War II, what's typically happened is they've taken control of the rivalry to the point that they've made Michigan care at their level. And then Michigan's made the pivotal hire or pendulum swing that swung it back for a period of time and then goes back to kind of being its comfortable academic blue blood who still thinks these are actual student athletes and wants them to be. And Ohio, see, that's the cycle here. And Michigan's in a Pax Romana right now. I mean, Sharon Moore could go out there and go 8-4, and people are like, it's his first year, we lost a ton. Kalen DeBoer does that. I mean, Bubba the Love Sponge is cutting himself like the prophets of Baal on Mount Carmel.
No question.
So
no question. They're, as we say down here, they're burning
Ray
Walmarts.
Perkins all over again.
Yeah.
Yes, it's Ray Perkins all over again. Okay, that's what's happening. And so it's just not the same expectation level, for better or for worse. I kind of lament this, but so I'm not saying it's great. I'm just the weatherman here telling you the forecast. He's also the first black coach at Michigan. And at a school like Michigan, given its cultural political bent, that means a lot. And he's going to be given you're already seeing it. I mean, Michigan is already involved in recruiting battles. Since he got his staff and his recruiting staff and everything together, Michigan is already involved in NIL recruiting battles that Harbaugh wanted no part of the last 2 years. And Michigan would have said, 6 months ago, that's, kind of beneath us. Now, we're never going to be, paying the rate that Oregon and Ohio State is for players right now. But
True.
He's good at, and because I also think Michigan doesn't want to do that. I think Michigan looks at A&M and programs like that and thinks that's a culture killer. I think Saban did that too, and that's one of the reasons why he walked away. It's just anybody who's coached in the NFL, and Saban and Harbaugh have, no, it's a terrible scheme to be paying rookies more than Grizzlies. Terrible idea to be paying more money to guys who haven't done a damn thing in a uniform than guys that have gone out there, and broken a testicle for you in August heat for 3 years. That's a terrible idea in terms of your culture. And you're seeing a lot of the programs that do that, frankly, are not having nearly the success on the field that their recruiting rankings have forecasted. So some of that will balance out in the next 24 months. College football will have direct pay for play for the players. And that will mitigate much of this, not all of it. Collectives will still matter because that's how you'll come over the top rope to pay the top guys. But most of these guys now are going to have a base wage, things of that nature that'll mitigate some of this and make it more like the NFL. But for right now, you do have huge risk to your culture by engaging in that. And so Michigan won't do that for those reasons, but everything else Sharon Moore is going to get. They're going to want heavily Jim Harbaugh's appointed successor, the man he personally groomed, and the first black coach at the school. They're not going to want to fail. And so he's got tremendous, and on top of that, he'll get more patience. So if Sharon Moore can't make it here, and what does that look like? He's got him in a 12-team playoff. He's got to make the playoff at least once in his first 3 years. If he doesn't, he'll be gone. Okay, but he'll be given every advantage in order to do that. Michigan wants him to be successful. They're invested in him from day one, and that's just something Kalen DeBoer, as an outsider, just does not have and may not need, given how good of a coach he is. And honestly, if Jim Harbaugh had left a week or two earlier, Kalen DeBoer would probably be coaching at Michigan right now.
That's a great point. That's what a friend of mine told me well before it happened. Yeah. Dave Bartu is all in the coaching industry, and he had DeBoer. He had DeBoer going to Michigan. You just mentioned the timeline didn't work out for y'all. And then he was also like, watch what happens with Ryan Day. But But he's got another. I've only got a couple minutes here. Steve Deace at Michigan Podcast on Twitter. He joins us on the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line. Where do you think Ryan Day is right now within the Ohio State Buckeye fan base with what? And I know Michigan's going to take a step back.
I got to tell you, in politics, I see this all the time. Okay, they're very talented, but Urban Meyer's idea, this is the most talented team in recent memory. It's not as talented as the team we had last year. Who's their edge rusher? Who's Chase Young? Who's the Jeffrey Okudah shutdown corner? Who's the first-round pick at quarterback? Who's the Orlando Pace at tackle? They don't have any players like that. They're very talented. They always are. But this idea that this is the most talented team in recent memory, that's Urban Meyer. Now you're in my arena of politics. This is where you are heaping expectations upon someone to set them up to either crap or get off the pot. You're creating the narrative in advance that allows you to nice them if indeed past history becomes indicative of future performance. Okay, so this is all a setup for him. He has to beat Michigan at a minimum Thanksgiving weekend, or if he doesn't win that game, has to get to like the national championship game. Anything short of that, he'll be gone. And that's what all those expectations are about. They are setting themselves up to yank the floor out from underneath him at the end. And what I worry about with them, my power rating numbers think that they're a pretty strong favorite in the Big Ten. And sometimes if the numbers are close, I'll go with my intuition. Like Phil Steele often says, he'll veto his computer. But when the numbers are this strong as they are, I'll just go with the numbers. So my numbers have Ohio State power rated, 4 to 7 points better than any other Big Ten team on a neutral field.
Yeah.
So fine. But I worry about them with all that expectation, all that pressure. And can they deliver? Because he's being set up to fail there. So good luck to him.
We'll leave it there. Steve Deace at Michigan Podcast on the Out of Bounds Show. Thanks, Steve. Appreciate you.
You got it, brother. Take care.
This is ESPN 105.9 The Zone. We'll be live from Dancing Rabbit Golf Club tomorrow. Pearl River Resort, Philadelphia, Mississippi. Bet 50 at the sportsbook. Play award-winning Dancing Rabbit Golf Club for $40. PearlRiverResort.com. We need to come back and give away a couple of Miranda Lambert tickets, so we'll jump into that. And the AgUp.com text line is on fire. Hit us up with the text after Steve Deace joined us, 601-885-3776.